what people did Jesus look like? Many people develop different ways of imagining the physiognomy of Christ. We have blondes with blue eyes, blacks, Oriental, and many others. Some attempt to imagine artistic representations through their social ideologies. But can we actually define the physical characteristics of Jesus? First, we know that Jesus was Jewish, that is, of the Jewish family, and Jew today has characteristics of a clear people. In genetics, if a people is very homogeneous, it tends to manage their characteristics to be similar for many previous eras. In fact, by means of the present Jews, we would have a Jesus of white skin, and of lean and high form. But let us take a closer look at these things, supposing the Bible has the true accounts of the ways of the Hebrew people. We can begin with Abraham. In the biblical version we have, "And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it." So Abraham, the so-called patriarch of the people of Israel, came from Ur. The people of Ur were composed of Akkadians and Sumerians, so Abraham was of this people. We can now say that you are in the Iraqi region. The descendants of these ancient regions, between Akkadians and Sumerians, are the Cypriots, who are today from southeastern Russia to Greece. And we still have the Druze, who are the peoples who have dispersed around Syria. In other words, Abraham comes from a point of the genealogical tree prior to these two people. The culture developed for this people is of all costs not to mingle with the neighboring peoples. So if they follow the norms for the people, they should therefore keep the genetic baggage of the people of Ur of the Chaldeans. Abraham is heading for Egypt. In Egypt, Abraham did not mix with the Egyptians. The Egyptian people were of African descent, but there was no concept of racism by skin color, but by religion, or types of service. Thus the Habirises, which means nomads like Abraham, were considered lower classes, and those who lived in towns like the Egyptians were superior to the Habirises. In fact, for an Egyptian a white woman would be an exotic beauty, and as Abraham came from Ur, his wife would draw attention among the African descendants. And so the danger that Abraham ran, in which Abraham already predicted what would happen. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh, due to the plagues of God, lets Abraham go with his wife, and this remains in Nuberga region near Jerusalem. From there Abraham sends a woman from his land in Mesopotamia to his son Isaac. This again manages to ensure that the genetic code is directed to the peoples of that region. Isaac has Jacob and receives the following instruction. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob, and sent him away to Padanaram, to take him a wife from thence, and that as he blessed him he gave him a charge, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. We have that Jacob, who becomes Israel later, continues the same rule of seeking women from the Mesopotamian region. This brings about the formation of the 12 sons of Israel, with the genes of the Mesopotamian region. Joseph, son of Israel, ends up becoming a slave in Egypt. Remember that slavery is not a peculiarity of whites to blacks, but also has blacks who enslave whites. This is because they are all men, and just as a white man can enslave, a black man can, or any other human being, be Chinese, Indians, and others. Then a descendant of Mesopotamian lineage is enslaved in Egypt and ends up marrying an Egyptian. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath the daughter of Potiphar a priest of On bare unto him. Here were formed 2 groups, Manasseh and Ephraim. In these groups we have a mixture of Mesopotamian genes with Africans. The other brothers of Joseph go to Egypt, and make a dwelling there, and after a while they are enslaved. Thus we have a separation of races, in which the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrews, coming to afflict with heavy services, and still kill the children of Hebrews. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. And so Egyptians of African descent, enslaved with great tyranny the Mesopotamian descendants, and killed their newborn children, drowning them in the Nile River and being eaten by crocodiles. At that time comes Moses, who ends up going to Midian, and manages to take the Hebrews out of the slavery of the Egyptians. And it is seen that the Hebrew people prized the purity of race, in the verse. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Many things come to pass later, and various norms for non-blending with other peoples have been given. There are many destruction, and there remaineth 2 tribes of Judah, and a portion of the tribe of Levi. With these characteristics a people is born Jesus, which in Hebrew is Yehoshua. It would be presumed that Jesus was predominantly Mesopotamian genes. Knowing that Jesus is of the tribe of Judah, and these are the generations of the Jews today, all the cultural and historical factors lead to define that the genetic baggage of Jesus is Mesopotamian. We could generate the idea that Jesus has divine genes, which would be a totally unreasonable concept to the case. We idealize that the divine concept was merely spiritual, and that if God existed, he would not be bound to genes, then there would be no concept of divine genes. But we can still use very technological mechanisms to make such a discovery, which would be a DNA examination of the Jews. The Jews suffered a diaspora and went to various places, among them we can highlight Russia and Germany, but they spread in many other peoples, but always with the culture of purity of race. Some of them managed to return to the old territory. In order to discover the Hebrew origins, a study was carried out in which 121 people living in 14 Jewish communities around the world, Africa and Europe, Central Asia and India, and then compared with 1,166 individuals in 69 non-including the country or region where there was a Jewish community. And SNPs analyzed the single nucleotide polymorphisms. SNPs are unique changes in the genome that cluster into distinct patterns among humans living together in clusters over thousands of years. And so it came to this conclusion: the Jewish patterns of SNPs were closer to those of Cypriots and Druze, non-Jewish populations. The SNP clusters of the region confirmed a close relationship between Bedouins, Jordanians, Palestinians and Saudis. And in the Egyptian, Moroccan, Berber and Yemenite samples, however, they were more similar to the populations south of the Sahara. In other words, Jesus of the tribe of Judah would fundamentally have its pattern of resemblance to the Druze and Cypriot. In other words, it would not be a European with light hair and green eyes and nose and sharp face. Nor would it be Eastern, not even black. Sometimes people or groups try to place themselves on the superiority of races, sometimes seeking to define the European Jesus as an ideology of superiority of race by the individual who stands out. To define as black is also the same as the European. Now Jesus' Jewish descent comes from the genes of 2 peoples who have great difficulties of continuing to exist, losing many areas of land and tending to decline. For example, black people are an extensive population, which only loses to the Orientals. The act of searching for social and non-scientific concepts, if such a prominent individual is of this or that group strain, is racism, whether white, black, or any other. We must understand what we have in the biblical writings. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus. In fact, the genetic baggage of the group that belongs to Jesus is not bound up in racial fights between blacks and whites, and more. Jesus was so despised that those who possess the genetic baggage do not wish to define it in their system of lineage.